It is a pleasure to see so many of you tonight for the final installment of the Manhattan Collaborative Lecture Series, focused on Jewish values and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Given today's news regarding the horrific attacks in Yafo, Israel, where 11 people were stabbed and an American tourist killed, this conversation could not have come in a more critical time. Our hearts and prayers are with them. Just last night, we welcomed nearly 1,400 people to hear from David Brooks talk about building communities of character. Tonight, we continue our focus on the theme of community building, and I would like to take this opportunity to extend an invitation to all of you to come back again and join us for important community conversation here at Skirball. On March 29th, Lord George Carey joins us in partnership with the Simon Wiesenthal Center to discuss the BDS movement and Christian perspective on anti-Semitism in UK and Europe. On March 30th, 6 of the country's leading rabbis, including Harold Kushner, who 30 years ago wrote the best-selling books, When Good Things Happen to Bad People, When Bad Things Happen to Good People, Good evening, my name is Donniel Hartman, and I'd like to welcome you. Typo, sorry, okay. Join us to discuss how challenges in life affect our faith. On April 13, Gloria Steinem will be here to discuss her life's work and the progression of feminism. And on May 16, Natan Sharansky, the head of the Jewish Agency, will discuss the importance of Jewish unity across the world. And I'm only going to tell you about an event that we'll have 6 months from tonight, our opening event for the fall. We are honored to host Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who will be with us tonight. That event is going to be sold out, so please buy a ticket now. But tonight, Rabbi Donniel Hartman is here to conclude the popular lecture series, which seek to transform conversation about advocacy to one of values. Dr. Hartman is president of Shalom Hartman Institute and director of the I Engage project. He is the founder of some of the most extensive education, training, and enrichment programs for scholars, educators, and religious and lay leaders in Israel and North America, and a prominent author. Following Rabbi Hartman's 45-minute presentation, he will be joined on stage by Rabbi Joy Levitt, Executive Director of the JCC. We will also be passing along cards. We can write questions for Dr. Hartman, which we will provide Joy to ask from the stage. On behalf of the Shalom Hartman Institute, I would like to thank BJA Federation of New York, the Legacy Heritage Fund, and all of the partnering synagogue, including, here we go, Bnei Jeshuim, Central Synagogue, Congregations Anshe Chesed, Kilat Jeshuim, Oz Arua, Rodef Shalom, Sha'arei Tzedek, JCC of Manhattan, Kilat Reim Aruvim, Park Avenue Synagogue, Romemu, Society of the Advancement of Judaism, Southern Place Synagogue, Temple Israel of City of New York, the Temple Emanuel-Skirball Center, and West End Synagogue. Again, thank you all for joining us, and remember to take what you hear tonight and share it with friends, families, and others. Together, we should continue to engage in conversations that help the Jewish community as a whole. Speaking about maintaining our moral compass in a time of crisis and conflict, please join me in welcoming Dr. Donniel Hartman. Good evening.
Before I begin to talk about maintaining our moral compass, as head of the Shalom Hartman Institute, I want to tell you how exciting it is to be here, and how thankful I am to all of you who make this possible. When you listen to the long list of institutions who join together to engage in a conversation and study, we don't usually join together. We're all, very often, we're silenced. We get together when somebody dies. Sure, We know how to make shiva calls. We know how to get together if there's a crisis. But to get together to learn and to think is a very, very powerful and important and beautiful thing which we can't take for granted. And I too want to thank Eric Goldstein and the professional and lay leaders of the UJ Federation of New York and its Commission on Jewish People. These types of things don't happen by accident. And to my colleague rabbis and colleagues, the most important group that the Hartman Institute works with are rabbis. And to be here with your communities is very, very special. And I also have the opportunity to thank some people who some of you know and some of you don't know. But we're going to be talking about how you maintain your moral compass. One of the ways you maintain a moral compass is by saying thank you when thank you is due. And first and foremost, I'd like to thank the Vice President of Shalom Hartman Institute of North America, Rabbi Markov, who, yes, please, who oversaw this whole series in every single way, babied it, nurtured it, and we're here because of you, thank you. And to the staff of the Shalom Hartman Institute of North America, Nomi, Tova, Ben, Sabra, and Mimi, all of you are benefiting from their hard work. And so on behalf of all of you, let's together thank them as well. It's very hard to maintain your moral compass. It's very, very difficult. You think it would be simple. You think it would be clear. You know who you are. You know what you stand for. But one of the great difficulties that the human race faces is not knowing the good, but it's doing the good. There isn't a great mystery about what constitutes the good. And all the conversations about the great fluctuations in our moral principles, they're mostly fluctuations in the application of our moral principles. Core moral principles are quite consistent now, for centuries, if not millennia. But despite the fact that we know the good, it's difficult doing it, because the test, when you know the good, in performing it, is not when everything is fine and easy. It's not when you are living with tremendous bounty and excess, to be willing to give a little bit to someone who is more in need than you. The real test is when you're frightened. The real test is when you're attacked. The real test is when people argue that doing the good undermines your survival. The real test is what place does your moral principles have when you're in the midst of danger. Then you're tested. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we're being tested. And I want to talk about how we think about this question. What's the conversation that we insist on having? What's the conversation that we insist that those around us have? What are the things that we don't allow to be said? Because we, as Jews, know that the statement regarding sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never harm me, is nourishment. Words harm. And what are the words that we as a community are stating? I want to start by taking you on a short journey through the peace process over the last 30, 40 years. We Jews more or less woke up to the fact that there is a Palestinian people somewhere in the 70s. As the euphoria of the Six-Day War and our coming home we began to get used to it. In 1977, the State of Israel for the first time recognizes the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. Prior to that, we didn't even know if there was a Palestinian people, and definitely what their rights were and what it applied to us wasn't an issue. I remember making Aliyah in 1971 and going to Beit Lechem, and I didn't see anybody. I didn't feel as if my being there somehow was impinging on anyone. I loved shopping in Beit Lechem with my mother. It was really close. Really quick trip down there at Hebron from the German colony, and we were there. There was no wall, nothing. 1977, Begin recognizes officially there is a Palestinian people and they have legitimate rights. And when you say that a people have legitimate rights, what you're saying is that those rights obligate you. Obligate me. Now he argued, I can't create a Palestinian state, but I can create what he then at the time coined autonomy. And I'm not getting into whether that's a sufficient or not sufficient political solution. It recognized that there is something that the Jewish people owe a people who we are occupying. There is a free people who have rights, and those rights obligate us. Over time, that language gave birth to a peace movement in Israel, with a majority of Israelis, still to this day, less, but still to this day, hoping for a two-state solution. A solution in which Israelis and Palestinians will live side by side in peace and security. The first stage of this peace process was that we felt that as Jews, we do not want to occupy another people. The first stage of the peace process was that I did not come home to control another people. I want peace because I want for you sovereignty. I want peace because I want for you what I have. I take seriously what Hillel taught us. What's hateful unto you, do not do unto others. That is the whole Torah, and the rest is commentary. And if I, as a Zionist, believe that we Jews have a right to the state, then I also believe that Palestinians have a right to the state, as embedded within my Zionist ideology. I might believe that all of Israel belongs to me. I might believe that the land is mine. I might believe that Judea and Samaria is not the West Bank, it's Judea and Samaria, and it's more connected to me than Ashkelon, or than Herzliya, or Tel Aviv. But because I own something, and because I have a right to a certain space, I also have a right not to exercise my rights. And the peace process which captured most Israelis was a decision, I don't want to exercise my right to the land because I want to exercise my responsibility to be who it is that I believe I ought to be as a Jew. This ideology gave birth to the Oslo Accords. It took time. There were other processes which influenced us. But ultimately, it gives birth to the Oslo Accord and the aspiration or the feeling that our dream of living side by side with another people at peace, in which I, as a Jew, am able to respect the inalienable rights of Palestinians, could be actualized. We tasted it, and we were profoundly excited. The Oslo Accord led to, some people argue caused, some people just said it led to, the Second Intifada, in which the core narrative, which to this day is dominant in the state of Israel and quite prevalent in the Jewish people at large, is that we offered and they said no. We gave you a chance. We said to you, I want to respect your inalienable rights. And they said, I'm not going to respect your inalienable rights. That did not cause Israelis to stop seeking the two-state solution, but the narrative changed. And to understand the change in this narrative is critical for us to understand where we are today and how we maintain the moral compass in these difficult times. Now the narrative became, we want a two-state solution because Israel has to be a Jewish democracy. In essence, the argument is that we want a two-state solution not because you have inalienable rights that obligate you. I want a two-state solution because I don't want to be the one who occupies you. You don't deserve anything. Frankly, a plague on all your houses. You said no. And if you said no, you don't claim me at all. But even though you don't claim me, I want to be a Jewish democracy. And the great cancer is not occupation. The great cancer is now demographics. And now we all know about demographics. I will not be a democracy if we control the land from the Mediterranean to the Jordan Valley. And so in many ways for ourselves, the peace process becomes self-interest. And to this day, Secretary of State and the President of the United States, when they speak about the need to begin again or to kickstart negotiations over and over and over again, the only language they mention is that Israel will not be a Jewish democracy. We're talking, it's your interest. We're not talking about your self-interest. Do a tzedakah to yourself. You have an inalienable right or an inalienable responsibility. You need to be this, and they're bothering you. But now, the peace process is not about seeing them. I'm not seeing you. I'm just seeing me. That leads, in 2005, to unilateral withdrawal. And that's one of the reasons behind the conversion of Ariel Sharon. Because no longer did it assume some peace-loving attitude amongst the Palestinians. And no longer did it speak in terms of security and rights and who owned the land. It spoke about a new priority which you have to think about, and that is that even though it's our land, and even though they don't want peace, we don't want to, if we hold on to it, we won't be who we need to be. That was a peace language that Ariel Sharon could understand. That was the argument articulated by Ehud Olmert, and he bought it, and it leads to a unilateral withdrawal. And lo and behold, a great surprise that peace doesn't ensue. It wasn't a peace treaty. It wasn't even negotiated. It wasn't about us seeing you. It was about us connecting to who we need to be. Now it's not so bad. We in our tradition learn, who needs purity of motive? Purity of motive is overrated. It's overrated. What do I care what your motives are? Are you doing the good? Do the good. So if your motives aren't the greatest, if you're giving tzedakah because it makes you feel good, okay, that's not such a terrible thing. I can think of worse things to do. So your motives aren't so great. At the end of the day, when you deliver, where you go. But since 2005, since we withdrew, not from Gaza, we withdrew into ourselves. Withdrawing into a number that will not constitute a demographic threat. And by the way, in this language, Israeli Arabs are a demographic threat. Now, how do you think a citizen of a country feels when the majority calls them a demographic threat? And then you might be surprised that a majority of Israelis believe that we have a right not only to discriminate, but actually even to kick Arabs out of the state of Israel. Because what do you do with a demographic threat? But as we contracted into ourselves, we start seeing Palestinians. As we looked into the horizon, all we looked at was what would be good for us. And a conversation about our moral responsibilities basically ceased. Because we don't have moral responsibilities. Because we offered and they said no. And after we contract into ourselves, missiles come. And after we contract into ourselves, terror continues. And with every single stabbing, not only are Jewish lives taken, but with every single stabbing, the notion that we have a moral responsibility to them is diminished. To the extent now today, and this is the cutting edge conversation today in Israel. For the first time in the history of the state of Israel, not a fringe, not some crazy, immoral nutcase, not somebody who we will kick out of the Knesset, but mainstream in Israeli society. If they're continuing to kill us, then you know what? So maybe we won't be a democracy. I'd rather be alive than dead. And if the consequence is that we won't be a democracy, and if you're telling me that I'm supposed to withdraw, or I'm supposed to give some concessions, just so that I can be a Jewish democracy, by which we mean a state of the Jewish people which is democratic, that means that we have a majority. So you know what, we won't have a majority. Or I'll kick out Arabs so that I can be a Jewish democracy. Interesting concept of democracy, but that's another issue. Because I was seeing, and seeing myself, the next stage is what's in my best interest right now. And this is the history of the conversation that has taken place in Israel. And my friends, it's a very, very understandable and justifiable conversation. I can understand why someone would speak this way. I can understand why someone would say, I just don't care. I just don't care about you. I don't care about somebody who's willing to kill me. I don't care about somebody who funds the family of someone who kills me 10 to 100 times more than they would make if they were alive, creating profound financial incentives, names streets and promenades for people. You sat witnesses in Egypt, it's the same thing. You had a meeting with an Israeli ambassador, you can't be a member of the parliament. I thought I had a peace treaty with you. Play out of your houses. What do you think? I'm asking myself what I owe you? I just need to survive. You don't claim me at all. But because we can understand it, it doesn't mean that we should accept it. Every generation had different challenges. Some generations, their primary challenge was how do they outrun the Cossacks' horses. Other generations had challenges. How do we survive the death camp? We thank God for another generation. We have dangers, but frankly, we are powerful. We are very powerful people. And Israel is a remarkably powerful country. It's no accident that we can never defeat either Hezbollah or Hamas in war. Because they never show up. Because the amount of power that we could put at any given point so far surpasses anything that they can imagine. All they could possibly do is shoot and run and try to ambush. They can't meet us in the battlefield. The days of meeting an enemy in the battlefield, at least now, I'm excluding ISIS because I don't know fully, and I don't think anybody fully knows their profound military capacity. The Russian Air Force is testing it, but that's for military experts to analyze. We are powerful people. We don't have to hide from the Cossacks or the Nazis. Our challenge is how do we live in a very, very difficult time and still maintain our core moral standards. How do we maintain our core moral conversation? How do we fight a trend that this is not something that might happen? It's happened. And over the last 10 years, Israel has profoundly changed. And everybody who's here, you're weird. So am I. Are you weird? Still saying I'm just going to be doing here talking about Israel. Do you know how many Jews and younger Jews in America are looking at Israel and saying, I don't want to do this. This is what Jews are doing? I have no interest. It's not me. Who do we want to be? Could any of you imagine in your worst nightmare, the majority of Israelis would believe that we could kick Israeli Arabs out of Israel? That made Mayor Kahana's party illegal. Can you even imagine? Or that in a democracy, it's taken as self-evident that Jewish rights are preferential and should be given preference to the rights of non-Jews in democracy. Is this the home that we came back to build? It's understandable. I live in Israel, I understand. I know how easy it is to hate. But how do we overcome? Now, our tradition has a very ambivalent relationship to the non-Jewish world. Our tradition isn't simple. And anybody who claims that it's simple and clear just has never read the Bible. And if you stick your head in the sand, the view is truly great. Things look fine. And it's true, ignorance is bliss. It truly is bliss. Our tradition was very ambivalent about our relationship with the non-Jewish world. When God says to Abraham in Genesis 12, go forth, go forth from your land, from your father's home, from your family, to the land that I will show you, I'll make of you a great nation. And then there comes this, and I will make of you, and you shall be a blessing. What a great word. What a great statement. You shall be a blessing. Going to make of you a great nation, and you shall be a blessing. But what does you shall be a blessing mean? Our tradition was very ambivalent about it. And that ambivalence can trace itself and has been shaping Jewish attitudes towards the non-Jewish world for 3,000 years, and now it is shaping deeply the conversation of our people today, in particular in Israel. You shall be a blessing. One explanation for you shall be a blessing is I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And all the nations of the world shall bless themselves through you. That version of you shall be a blessing is, from now on, God says, I only see you. Now that you have become my chosen one, from this moment on, I don't see anybody else. You are a blessing because anybody who wants to be blessed has to bless you. And anybody who curses you will be cursed by me. Because I, God, only see you. You are the apple of my eye. You are like a parent who, if you're nice to my kids, it's like, again, I know this is being filmed, but the people who marry my children know very clearly. I love them dearly. As long as they're nice to my kids. Life's simple. Simple. Kids first. Nice to my kids. Love you to death. Not nice to my kids. I'm an in-law. That's the meaning of in-law. We're going to edit this down. See, I have to, because now I have grandchildren. Self-dependent. So I have to sit so really good. Yeah. Yes. That's what I mean. And chosenness means God loves us. And it created a long-standing tradition that I'm going to come back to in a moment of basically neglect, and if not neglect, just ignoring the non-Jewish world. God chose us. We're going to ignore them because God's ignoring them. That's one. Abraham chose a different reason. Abraham in Genesis 18, God says, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do before he destroys the city of Sodom? Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Since he is going to become a great nation and all the nations of the world are going to bless themselves through him, for I have chosen him, because I know that he is going to walk in the way of, that he will walk in the way of God by doing what is just and right. God says to Abraham, I have to speak to you about stone. And in that moment, God is basically saying to Abraham, when I elected you to be a great nation, I am making you responsible for the world. And that you shall be a blessing is not that the world all goes through your belly button. But that chosenness is not a gift, but chosenness is a responsibility. I give you a Torah. You're going to walk in the way of God by doing what is just and right. And you have to ensure that this world is a world filled with justice and righteousness. And the most interesting thing about the story of Sodom It's not that Abraham argues with God, but that Abraham gets up and cares and takes responsibility for the city of Sodom. And in doing that, a different idea is put forth. And that idea is that to be a Jew is to be of exemplary and exceptional moral values and standards. That to be a Jew is to stand for the highest of what a human being must stand for. And that to be a Jew is to take your moral principles and lead and guide and attempt to shape your world. This, Genesis 18, is the first place and probably the most powerful place that the idea of Tikkun Olam, which you all know so clearly, is born. It then goes into hibernation for the rest of most of the Bible. But here it is born. To be a Jew is to be exceptional. You're not exceptional. It's to be obligated to be exceptional. And the idea of Tikkun Olam, 14 million people actually think it's their job to repair the world. Survive! You're a blimp. You're 14 million people. Nothing. Survive. No, I have a responsibility to the world. And Isaiah, very beautiful. Very beautiful. I want to read you a chapter from Isaiah 49. Not a chapter, 2 verses. Listen, O coastland, to me, and give heed, O nations afar. The Lord appointed me before I was born. He named me while I was in my mother's womb. He made my mouth like a sharpened blade. He hid me in the shadow of his hand and made me like a polished arrow. He concealed me in his quiver. God says, Jewish people, from the moment you were born, I shaped you in a certain way. You're an arrow in my quiver. There's a mission. He said to me, you are my servant, Israel, in whom I glory. Now I thought, I have labored in vain because I'm in exile. I have spent my strength for empty breath. But my case rests with God, my recompense was in the hands of God. And now the Lord has resolved, he has formed me in his womb to be his servant, to bring back Jacob to himself, that Israel may be restored to him, and I have been honored in the sight of the Lord. My God is my strength, and he has said, it's too little that you should just be my servant. And that I raise up the tribes of Jacob and restore the sight of the survivors of Israel. What do you think? I just made you so that you should survive? Worship me? That's the whole thing? That's the Jewish mission? To live another day? I will also make you a light unto the nations, that my salvation may reach the end of the earth. Your challenge to be exceptional is a challenge which has a universal mission. Now it's interesting. Every one of these chapters in Isaiah which speak about the servant of God, Christianity reads as applying to Jesus. And the servant of God chapters in Isaiah, Christianity reads as applying to Jesus, we read as applying to Israel. But it's not by accident. Because the idea of a light into the nations, the idea of exceptionalism, for centuries became an internal one. And it was Christianity who said, let me truly be a light unto the nations. Let me, Paul said, I'm going to walk to Damascus. You Jews don't care about Damascus. You Jews are worshiping God, and you have made monotheism into your own private national agenda. I'm going to fulfill your universal aspiration. I am going to be the light. But our tradition challenges us to be the light. But in order to be a light, two ideas. The first idea, that to be chosen means in many ways just to be separate. And the idea that to be chosen means to be exceptional, actually merge. And the Jewish tradition spent hundreds, if not 1,000 years, asking itself, how do I ensure, if you are supposed to be exceptional, how do I ensure that you don't assimilate? If you have a mission to be a light unto the nations, how do I make sure that you're there to be that light? And a major part of halakha was meant to create a people who's distinct and separate. Because if you're distinct and separate, then you're going to be exceptional. If you become like everybody else, then your exceptionality is going to be removed and disappear. And so myriads of Jewish law were developed. The primary goal was to create a Jewish community that sustained itself. Bilam looks at it. The prophet Bilam in the book of Numbers looks and says, this is a nation, this is a nation that dwells apart. It's not counted amongst the nations of the world. And we said, great, that's exactly what we're supposed to be. Because if we're going to be other, if we're going to be separate, then we will be able to keep that fire of exceptionalism alive. Why continue to be Jewish? Because we stand for something special. But that leads us to Israel and to the conversation today. And with that, I'd like to conclude. You can't be exceptional unless you have a distinct identity. If you become like everybody else, you can't be a light. Your light is diffused. If you don't exist, you can't repair a world. Because you are no longer you. Exceptionalism requires a measure of otherness and distinctness. But the challenge of otherness is that sometimes it could become, instead of a means, an end unto itself. You can get so involved in the enterprise of otherness that you forget. You are so committed to ensuring your own identity that at some point you forget what is it that you want to keep. And you create a circular argument. Who is a Jew? He or she who has a Jewish grandchild. That's not who's a Jew. That's a Jew. That's who is a Jew? Who will perpetuate the Jewish people, who will ensure for what? Add to that anti-Semitism. And now otherness doesn't simply become that which you develop in order to sustain your identity. But now otherness becomes your destiny. Move to the Middle East, and you experience not necessarily anti-Semitism, but you experience profound, profound otherness and loneliness. The reality of the experience of Israelis and the reality of the experience of many Jews on different generations is that we are a nation that dwells apart. We are a nation that others don't care for. We are a nation, we are the only nation in the world. If you are a member of the United Nations, it's illegal for you to undermine or to reject the legitimacy of another or fellow nation, another fellow United Nations member. It's against the United Nations Charter. with the exception of the state of Israel. Right now, otherness is increasingly the experience of the Israeli. We feel other, we feel alone. Israel potentially is the greatest ghetto ever formed in Jewish history. And when that happens, that ghetto doesn't serve exceptionalism. It causes it to be forgotten. Our challenge as a people, and it's difficult, is how do we sustain the conversation of who we want to be, despite the fact that we are experiencing profound otherness. If you want to know the challenge of Israel, far greater than a nuclear Iran. Far greater. It's not even close. And I know that's heresy. But one of the advantages of living in Israel is I'm allowed to be a heretic. Because I'm there. In Israel, which doesn't sustain its aspiration for exceptionalism, is not Israel. Our challenge as a people, both here and in Israel, is how do we understand the reality of otherness? How do we understand the fact that I recognize that to be who I want to be, I have to be? And Israelis now are very clear about their Jewish identity. Survival and otherness is clear. But how do we recognize that it is only a means? There are many missions that go on now to the state of Israel. Missions of advocacy, missions to convince people. You want, come to Israel, I want to tell you the Israeli story. I want you to be my friend, and I bring you on a mission. Guess what the aim today of these missions is? Guess what we yearn for? This is our ultimate aspiration, that if a person, congressman, people active in politics, various religious leaders, young people, do you know what our goal now is? Our goal is that people should come to Israel and come home knowing it's complicated. You're laughing. But what I just told you is the God's honest truth. If you come to Israel and know it's complicated, we won. Got my point across. It's complicated. Well, it's true. It is complicated. It is very complicated. Nobody knows how to actualize the peace process today. Nobody. And it's for that reason that 100 out of 120 members of Knesset don't want to talk about a peace process. 100 out of 120 members have nothing to say about a peace process. It's truly complicated. But there are things that are not complicated. It's not complicated that as Jews, we have to recognize the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. That's not complicated. It's not complicated to recognize that the 20% non-Jews who live in the state of Israel should feel that they won the lottery. That's not complicated. It's not complicated that Israel as a democratic state has to treat all of its citizens equally. That's not complicated. It's not complicated that the 43,000 refugees who've come to Israel, out of the 60 million who are living in the world, we have 43,000 said to. It's not complicated that every single one of of them should be settled and should be given a home and a place to work and a chance for their kids not to be stored in these little warehouses, 50 kids in a room 4 meters on 40 meters. That's not 4 meters. That's not complicated. It's a lot of things that are complicated. One line. How do we maintain our moral compass in a time of profound danger? We distinguish between what's complicated and what's not complicated. And because some things are complicated, doesn't mean that everything is complicated. When you hold on to your moral compass, when you hold on as Jews into your recognition that it is your job to be a blessing, and that we came back to Israel in order to be a blessing. We didn't come back to Israel in order to be a Middle Eastern phenomenon. We came back in order to be an exemplary country. Well, guess what? It's tough. Guess what? We live in a crappy neighborhood. Tough. Make the distinction between what's complicated and what's not. And when, as a community, we maintain that conversation as clearly as can be, then we're going to be a light to the nations. Then we will be who we ought to be. And then we will be a strong and powerful nation. Thank you.
So because we've been doing this for 20 years, and I'm so happy that the JCC has had such an important partnership with the Donniel Hartman Institute for so many years, I'm going to go personal at the beginning. And I'd like you to think about a time when you had to stare at that moral compass, when in fact you had to do what you've just asked us to do, which is distinguish between what's complicated and what's not complicated. When it was really hard and you had to just do it, and share that with us.
There are two. One in which I failed, and one in which I hope I succeeded. One was the war, where I fired when I wasn't sure. And where as a tank commander, I had to get an order to fire. I remember going through a village in Lebanon, in which it was like the roads were barely wide enough for a tank to go through. And we have very clear orders on who we fire and who we don't fire. And maybe like 3 feet from my head as a tank commander are windows. And in every window, perfect way, you don't have to take out a tank, you just have to shoot the tank commander in the head. And then him dying and bleeding the tank basically immobilizes the tank and the columns can't move. It's perfect. I remember in every window, I saw my death. And I fired into every window. Then I did it. Again, I can understand. I can understand what I did and why I did it. But there I wasn't thinking about my moral compass. Now, just this last summer, I was taken to southern Tel Aviv. We at the Institute set up the program. So I went there. Now, I've been talking. I'm a good talker. I move myself deep. The only one who's moved more than me is my mother. I've always said the right thing. I have. But I didn't do anything about it. My job has been primarily as a teacher. I've been feeling something shifting in Israeli society for 5 years. I went to southern Tel Aviv and was taken around by an organization called Israeli-Palestinian to the nursery schools of refugee children. Couldn't believe it. I went in there and I saw, like I walked in, and it's like, you wouldn't put your animals, truly, you wouldn't let your dog be in this room. And in that room was 30, 40 kids. In one room, there's cribs. The kids are in the cribs the whole day. And they're taken out just to change their diapers because their parents are working from 7 o'clock to 7 o'clock. And there's a television. That's their educational program. And if you go into the other room, there's another 30 kids. I go in, someone goes like this little kid. Now, I'm a really good grandfather. Like, that's finally the thing that I'm really good at. I'm done. I've reached my level of competence. This kid goes, someone picked up. So I picked him up. Nobody touches him the whole day. Nobody touches him. So I sat down with him in the corner. And 6 kids literally jumped on me. Literally. They jumped on me. And so they're playing. And I wanted to try to teach them something. Each one of them is holding on to one toy. And they fight it because there's not enough toys, so they're holding it. So let me show you how to build something. And I can't because there's only 3 pieces of Lego. I'm sitting there. I'm saying, Mother, this is what we choose to do. This is what 43,000 refugees. And we are declaring that they are a danger to the Jewishness of the state of Israel. That day, I went to the head of Eli-Fellow and I said, close your eyes. And tell me what you're missing. She said, I need a program, an afternoon program for kids aged 3 to 6. I have one for 6 to 12. The 3-year-olds, they leave the municipal nursery school and they're in the streets or they go back to warehouses. So I said to her, done. And since then, we founded a center for refugee children funded by the institutes. We send 6 institute scholars and faculty, and administration, and students every day. And now we're starting huge amounts of programs with Israeli Arabs. So I'm trying to do good right now. I'm trying that a major Jewish educational institution doesn't just talk. Because right now, this room, we're not doing well. We're not. And I'm trying. I'm trying to be one of those voices in Israel and one of those institutions which is actually reminding Israelis what's complicated and what's not. And everybody thinks, I want to stay away from politics. There's nothing to do with whether I believe there should be a Palestinian state tomorrow or not. So, I know very, very well when it is when you lose, and how easy it is to lose your moral compass.
can't tell you how, when you're facing death, literally, it is so easy. So easy. Right now, I'm trying, both personally and institutionally, to bring Israeli society back to a place where they recognize, here I don't mean to be insulted, but where they recognize that non-Jewish lives matter.
So I want to push you a little bit on the chosenness. I wouldn't be a good Reconstructionist rabbi if I didn't. Kaplan understood that it couldn't actually be reconstructed, right? That it was a fundamentally flawed idea because it led to door number one, and not door number two. There are clearly lots of people that would have faced that preschool and felt the way you felt, not Jewish, not chosen, not exceptional. So,
Policy. The official policy of the government of the state of Israel. So, should we get rid of chosen?
So you're clearly struggling with it, and I really appreciate that. How do you get to it's okay when so much of our community does not appear exceptional? And in fact, one might argue that the most segregated and isolated elements of our community, that distinctiveness of which you spoke, are the least exceptional.
I know. See, if you get rid of chosenness, you get rid of Zionism.
Yeah, but Kaplan was a big Zionist. He didn't have that problem.
I know. See, I had a dream that everybody will feel chosen. That Christians and Muslims, and Jews will each feel chosen in the sense that they are called to be exceptional. I'm hoping that we could have Kibana B'charta without Mikol Ha'amim. That we could have, he chose me, but not from amongst, over and above everybody else. So I love Jewish exception. It's the essence of my life's work. For me to be a Jew is not to look to the left or to the right, but it's to look inside and to say, who do I want to be? And to hold on to it, and to try to improve, and where we fail to recognize it, and to push further and further. And to be, I don't know if to be a light unto the nations, but to be a force for good. To be that the world is better because you're here. That's, for me, the whole essence of what I'm doing in this Jewish story. That's why I became a rabbi. Yeah, I give a crap about the kippah.
You can edit that out.
Excuse me, I apologize. It just doesn't matter. It's all about, are you better? Because when the more committed you are as a Jew, the more you love God, are you a more decent human being? And all of that is connected to this call to be the best that you could be. That's to be accepted. That's, for me, the essence of what it means to be a Jew. That's the essence of why we want a Jew. I don't need a Jewish state for Jews to survive. My grandparents did. I don't need a Jewish state in order to survive. The place where Jews are most in danger is in Israel. More than France. I don't need Israel to enable me to survive. I need Israel because I want a platform for the best of who we are. To define a country. And to be a message, both to ourselves and to the world. That's the only Zionism. I hope I'm right. But I know that I'm not sure. I know I'm not sure. And I would say that's one of the biggest, that's the challenge of our generation. Can we the other and exceptional at the same time. And frankly, what most American Jews, present company excluded, are trying for exceptionalism without otherness.
Maybe the challenge is also to live with the humility and uncertainty while you're doing it. Right? So you're talking to an American audience, and you may be aware that there's been some tension in this country about, our ability to share our
The
moral.
exception.
No, well, we're not talking about our election tonight. I promise.
Can I just say one thing about the election? I just want to say one thing.
There's no such thing as one
I
thing.
promise you this is, I love coming to America during the primaries. It's the only time in my life that I feel good about Israeli politics.
Below the belt now.
It's the truth.
But back to us. So, of course, I'm joking, but it is an obsession in this country and in our community about who has the right to say what, when, how, where, when it comes to Israel. So, I mean, friends don't let friends drive drunk, right? So, to what extent do you think we have a role as American Jews in the setting of this moral compass?
That's probably the most important question that I could be asked, and I thank you for. I want to teach you something that I learned from Professor Sidney Morgan-Besser of Columbia University, who's probably one of the greatest intellectual minds of the 20th century. He came to the Institute in the 80s. He used to be at a conference, a philosophy conference we had, and I was a young student at the time. And he said, Israel has to stop the settlements and get out of the West Bank. And he was saying this at a conversation. And the Israelis were furious at him. Furious. And they said, how dare you tell us what to do? Your life and your children's life is not on the line. Sidney Morgan-Besser, whose brilliance is just transcendent, said, oh, I apologize. You misunderstood me. I wasn't telling you what to do. I was just telling you what I think. I don't want you to tell me what to do. I don't. My son just finished 30 days of Milui, in which things happen to him that are just horrific. Horrific. There's a war going on that nobody wants to know about, because since we don't care about what happens with Palestinians, we don't talk about it. It's just not part of the conversation. When you ride on 443 from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, I want you to know on the two sides of the road there's a war. And my son was just in that war. I don't want you to put my son's life in danger. Israelis who vote, including right or left, I'm fine. I'm an American citizen. I love America. I pay taxes in America. I don't vote in America. Because I think a person should only vote in one country. I think there's one, if you vote, you can pay taxes in a lot of countries. But you only vote in one country. There's something about where your destiny is. I don't want you to tell me what to do. But we need you to tell us what you think. Now, we might get angry. And part of what's happening in Israel today is that when somebody lifts up a mirror and we don't like what we see, we shift our vision to who's holding up the mirror and attack them because I don't like the mirror. I don't like it. So then the issue is who? So we are fighting criticism right now, both in Israel And by the way, so I have heard, here too, in some circles. You can't be a people who wants to be a light unto the nations. You can't be a people who stands for Tikkun Olam if you are not a people who have and are committed to the most vigorous debate and self-criticism on an ongoing basis. If you don't want to be in that, then no problem. Welcome to the world of mediocrity. And mediocrity is antithetical to Judaism. We were put on earth to be like everybody else, to be mediocre. You shut down conversation, you're going to be mediocre. Then all you're going to have are those who agree with you. And then love is judged by how much you say how wonderful I am. There's something wrong when we start to develop these loyalty tests, litmus tests, who's in, who's out, who really loves. Those are all signs of fear. Those are all responses to an otherness ghetto mentality. I don't think that you are morally superior to Israelis, but you're 6,000 to 10,000 miles away. When 6,000 to 10,000 miles away, you might see something. So don't tell me what to do, but tell me what you think. And when you tell me what you think, then I think. So I'm speaking to you intentionally, and I say the same thing to Israelis. We're a people. And the people talks to each other. And the people cares about each other. And the people has hope for each other. And the people sets for each other a shared aspiration and helps each other get there. But knows very clearly that it's not your job to put me there. It's your job, though, to tell me when you think I'm not there yet. And so I can't tell you how much I wish the American community would stop this intellectual vigilance, this intellectual narrow-mindedness, where all of a sudden a bunch of liberal Jews, and I don't mean to speak negatively about ultra-Orthodox, but it is okay to say that ultra-Orthodox aren't always the paragons of religious pluralism. That's fair enough. That's just not in there right. You're acting like a bunch of Haredi Jews when it comes to Israel. The liberalism, the open-mindedness, the debate, which defines the community. And everything Jewish, when it comes to Israel, now there's now kosher, you're not kosher enough for me. We're now Mashgiach Kashrut on Israel. What happened to you? What happened to you? What is this, you a closet ultra-Orthodox and come out? I've been dying to be just... The whole liberalism, which, by the way, in the Jewish tradition, or at least my Jewish tradition is a compliment, to be liberal, is to believe that people have inalienable rights and inalienable liberties. And among them is the recognition that differences of opinions leads to greater understanding, greater truth. You shut down debate, you move further away from truth. Why does that apply to every feature of our life but not to Israel? Now, when you think that the only danger that Israel is facing is Iran, maybe I can understand. But now that we're seeing that there's something not right here, and when we recognize that the next generation of children, the biggest danger of BDS is not that our children are facing a pogrom on campus. They're not facing pogroms on campus. Shio. That's technical. Nonsense. There's no pogroms on campus. Stop it. Just stop it. Doesn't mean that a child who's walking around with a t-shirt which says I love Israel won't be attacked, and not physically attacked, won't be uncomfortable. Okay, it's not a pogrom. It's not, you have to use your terms. It's not a goal. The biggest danger is that what's becoming mainstreamed in our community, amongst our children, is a belief that there is no place to criticize Israel, and therefore the only place in the community in which they see a moral voice is in those who are rejecting the legitimacy of Israel. Because a community in which there is room for serious debate inside is a community where a child can say, to be Jewish is to stand for moral principles, and I want to bring that moral discussion to Israel. But if I can't, and I'm not allowed, because if you love Israel, you have to say, Israel's the best, and no one's going to teach us morality, and blah, 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 and if you're all the above. And in this world, I guess, listen, you're not kosher, you're not kosher, you're not kosher, no, oh, you're kosher, no. You could be in the conference, you can't be, you could be here. Kids look at it. And they leave. You want to worry about BDS on campus? Create a community in which there is limitless conversation. Where to be a Jew means to love Israel by talking about the Israel that I want. That's what the whole light engagement. Talk about the Israel you want. Your children will be part of that conversation. You don't want to talk about the Israel you want? You want everybody just to speak about the Israel as it is? Well, then your children are going to find the place for their moral conscience amongst those who aren't fighting the occupation of 67, but are fighting the formation of the state of Israel in 47.
So this is a question from the audience. How are your views received in Israel? Do you believe that you're hitting your head against a brick wall?
Here it's easy. I'm just like every Jew for the last 3,000 years. I'm a stiff-necked. I'm stiff-necked. We were stiff-necked from the first moment God picked us. We made God's life miserable. My job is to make Jewish life miserable. I don't mind. I'm not running for Knesset.
How come?
Because I'd be really bad. It's like,
that's hardly a bar.
No, it's like it's a different skill set. I'm a teacher. I think I could be a good teacher. Everybody has to know what they know and what they don't know. But there are people in Israel, like in any, just like here. Nobody's silencing me. We have more people coming to the Hartman Institute than ever in our history. We can't meet the demand. Israelis know that something's wrong. Whether they're willing to do something about it is another thing. But that's okay. I was raised, I had two great teachers in my life, my father, Allah Shalom, and my mother. My mother, as an Orthodox Rebbitzin, used to walk around with a sweatshirt in Montreal, which said, Viva la différence. Viva la différence. I was raised that if people do something, it's wrong. That's why in Montreal, we didn't ski. We had a mountain in the city. We didn't ski. Now sometimes, we didn't have television, because everybody has television. You don't buy presents, you make presents. I had an interesting you don't ski. It's like people ski. Why? Because people do it. I mean, if people do it, so I don't mind in this sense, being a little lonely is a good thing. It's a good thing. The biggest challenge that we face, it's a very on a personal level, is it's very easy to give up. Right now, the biggest challenge that we face, I face personally, and I feel that many of us face, is you can give up. It's not easy. It's easy right now to say, this is not my country. This is not who I want to be.
walk away from Israel, walk away from the Jewish people. It's tempting. But that's not what we were called to do. And our challenge is not to give up.
So let's go to the security question. Aren't you begging the question, another question from the audience, aren't you begging the question that at the moment, security is in fact more important than the conversation you wish Israelis would have?
Am I?
Begging the question. In other words, you've set this up as important for us to look at the moral compass, but aren't there actually two compasses here, right? Like,
absolutely.
Like dead men don't praise God.
Right. Great. Let me just, again, I don't mean again to insult anybody.
You actually do.
I do too. But again, I just want to say, tonight, in case anybody didn't know this, your opinions tonight on what Israel should do with Iran, ISIS, the Palestinian Authority, aren't actually going to shape Israel's policy. Tonight, the future of Israel's security is
not on the table.
Not on the table. And I am not the great security expert. I can. No. I think I am. But in that, I'm like every other Israeli, but the truth is I'm not. And so it's okay. There are serious people in Israel who are worried about Israel's security. And if you noticed, I didn't say one word tonight, one word about what Israel should do in the negotiations with the Palestinians. One word, quite to the contrary. Notice what I said. I said the opposite. I said none of us know how to actualize a peace process right now. None of us know what to do. That's actually what I said. I said, let's bracket it, not forget it. I'm not forgetting it. I live in Israel. I can't afford to forget it. Me, my wife, my children, my grandchildren, I'm part of that process. When missiles or terrorist acts happen, they happen on me. On me. I'm not a pacifist. I'm not naive. Some of you know, some of you don't know. I have a gun. And I don't have a gun because I think I have some inalienable right to protect myself against the government. I don't know that. What?
Ouch.
No, I'm not talking about America. I'm just talking about Sweden. I have a gun which is in my safe, and whenever I feel uncomfortable, I carry it. Because one of the great gifts of Israel is that I get to defend myself. I get to defend myself. I love that. So I'm not asking Israel not to defend itself. But what I'm actually suggesting is that in the midst of a period in which, for the foreseeable future, there isn't going to be a significant change in the foreign policy status quo, we have to realize that a foreign policy status quo does not create a moral status quo, but that a foreign policy status quo actually affects us in ways that we can't imagine. So Israelis want to say, and this is a statement in Hebrew, it's a common statement in Israel, nobody's going to teach us ethics. And I tell them, why is nobody going to teach you ethics? Nobody. Why? Because you died in the Holocaust? Nobody's going to teach you ethics. Why? We have the most moral army in the world. Every single Israeli senior officer in the Israeli army comes to the Hartman Institute and asks, what do you mean we're the most moral army in the world? Did you check Finland? What are you talking about? I just want to know.
I just want to know, the state, we're the most moral army in the world, is that a descriptive statement? Is there any counterfactuals that could be brought? Again, I love the Israeli army. I want to know. I'm not begging the question. I'm saying there's another question. There's something happening to us. And there's something happening in the Jewish community here which is silencing conversation. When a commitment to Israel is not a commitment to exceptionalism, but it's a commitment to survival for survival's sake. Don't give up. Don't give up your security concerns. I didn't speak about it all, but because of your security concerns, don't give up the other conversation about who we have to be. I was very clear. Because there are things that are complicated, it doesn't mean that there's things which aren't. Now, because I say that there are things which aren't complicated, I recognize that there's things that are. They are. But we can handle both. That's our responsibility. Welcome to sovereignty. Welcome to success. We're the first Jews who have to live with both. That's a blessing. Let's not make an either-or choice between the two.
So you referenced a number of times young American Jews on college campuses. This question is, what is the awareness and concern in Israel about how Israel's actions alienate young American Jews? I guess there's a broader question there.
Right.
Does Israel actually care?
No. Right now, and I understand this was the last sticker.
Is that it? Okay.
The reality is that Israel doesn't care. The reality is that the narrative in Israel is that you're going to be gone in 30 years. You're gone. But they're wrong. Israel, as by the way, many North American Jews, and Israel's not monolithic. I shouldn't speak in such generalities. But there are many here in Israel and many here in North America who feel that the only challenge we face is an outside danger. And if the only challenge we face is an outside danger, the danger that the kids face on campus is an outside danger. And what we need to do is to fight it, but we're unfortunately fighting it with the wrong weapons. And so, Israel, for example, would like to fight it by reminding everybody that we offered and they said no. Let me show you, here. He wrote a book. Even he said that we offered and they said no. Iran, France. We're trying in Israel to milk France. France is our definition of perfect anti-Semitism, of good anti-Semitism. Good anti-Semitism is enough anti-Semitism to make people worried and to feel loyal to Israel as the only safe haven without Jews dying. So, how do we have enough anti-Semitism in which will make the case for Israel? And so the question is, could France make a case for Israel on campus? Right? Could you vicariously experience France and through that feel that Israel's legitimate? And if that's the case, we're at that level of unsophistication right now. And by the way, it's not just Israel. Mainstream Jewish institutions are doing the same thing here. And that's why we talk about pogroms on campus. Foolishness. That's why we even use the words. We use the words. I had to shame a Presbyterian minister in a group of Presbyterians who came, who were in Israel, and they asked me to come speak to them. And one of them says, Rabbi Hartman, could you please explain to me how the victim now became the victimizer? And I says, what do you mean? He says, well, we were just spent a week in Beit Lechem. And we met people of great hope. And their great critique of Israel is how those who suffered from the Nazis have now become the new Nazis. This is what the Presbyterian, and I said to myself, I'm not justifying the occupation, and I'm not belittling the reality of Palestinians in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria. But Beit Lechem is not Auschwitz, and shame on you for making that comparison. Shame on you. And she felt shame. And she said, you're right. I said, let's deal with the issue. Similarly, shame on anybody who uses the term pogrom for what's happening on campus. Shame on you. Shame on you for manipulating the Jewish community. Shame on you for trying to create an atmosphere of fear. And an atmosphere where you could somehow create an argument or create a support which you haven't earned. I'm not saying that we don't have to be concerned about BDS. And I'm not saying that on campuses everything is fine. And I am worried about the fact that there's universities where there are courses where a student feels that there's an imbalance. And where students who are pro-Israel can feel alienated. I'm worried about that, and I think the Jewish community is right to be partial. And I think the Jewish community is right to say, okay, I have to worry about what's going to happen in 10 years' time, and it's good to act now. All of this is smart. But pogroms on campus? You know better than that. But everywhere I go in America, people are talking to me about the pogroms on campus. Everywhere I go. We do that because we don't want to face the core challenge that we face. And Israelis are doing the same. I could come and I could say, Iran 3 times. France twice. Berkeley once. And now we have a strategy. And that's about as sophisticated as the Jewish community. Now, in the core challenge of BDS, I think we are relatively sophisticated with legislation. The economic boycott is a failure, and we're working, and Israel is working. But every single time somebody criticizes a settlement, and Israel says you're anti-Semitic, it's very convenient to conflate anti-Israel with anti-Semitism. The consequence, though, is that we're also going to conflate people who are bothered by 67 with those who are bothered by 47. And Israel is doing that, and it believes that if it does so, it's going to move people away from the criticism of 67. But in fact, what it's doing is it's creating more and more people who are questioning 47. And so, right now, Israelis aren't waiting. They certainly don't want you to tell them what to do. And they're frankly not that interested in hearing what you think. So guess what? Who cares? Here now I get to share with you a key teaching of my father, Alav Shalom. And he said this in the 70s. He said, Israel is too important to leave to the Israelis. In the 70s, he said that. So guess what? Someone doesn't want to hear. The Israelis don't want to hear. Okay, make them. There's not a single educational, medical, cultural, intellectual movement that has happened in the state of Israel since 1948 or even before that hasn't happened in profound partnership with you. Nothing. You worry about your voice, you have a voice. Why do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu pushed through the additional section of the Kotel because it's good for his coalition. You actually have in Netanyahu a prime minister more sensitive to what you think than any prime minister that I can remember in decades. Far more. He is more sensitive than any prime minister. Far more than any Labour prime minister. He's aware. It's not going to be easy. The issue you have to ask is what's at stake. If you want to walk away from Israel, you can. You really can. And now it's becoming increasingly mainstream. A colleague of mine writes a major article, I've given up on Israel. I've now declared Israel, I've supported it my whole life, I've now declared it a failed experiment. You can give up on Israel. Or you can fight for it. But you're not going to ensure that the next generation of Jews either remains Jewish or remains connected to Israel if it is not something that you fight about. And Israelis aren't going to get either your support or your children's support by default. We're only going to get it when your voices ring loud and clear, and they aggravate, and they insult, and sometimes they hug. But all of the above, let your voices ring loud and clear, and I promise you, it will make a difference. There are hundreds of Israeli institutions who are your partners, hundreds. Your synagogues, your JCCs, Federation. You have avenues of influence that Israelis don't want to hear, that they just want you to put an absentee ballot in and say yes, amen, and that they want you to invite Israeli politicians to all your national conferences so they get up and lie to you. It's like this strange story. It's like you're very intelligent. I don't understand. I really just don't understand. You have Israeli politicians coming, giving the speech that you want to hear that you know they're not going to keep. You give them a standing ovation, and then you fetch. Maybe this is a new Jewish ritual. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not familiar with it. It's like, lie to me. I don't understand it. Be serious. Be serious. Fight for Israel. Fight for your voices to be heard. And maybe, we're hitting ourselves against the wall, a brick wall. Brick walls aren't that strong. You can break a brick wall.
Please join me.